Next, from the state capitol, members of the House Personnel and Pension Committee hear testimony from Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel on the economic threat posed by the city's growing pension debt. Mayor Emanuel, testifying with two of his chief financial officers, tells lawmakers that without reforms, he would have to raise property taxes by 150% to continue to meet pension obligations. Instead, he proposes a series of reforms. This runs about 45 minutes.
And we know what happens to the city of Chicago does not simply affect the people that live in the city of Chicago. What happens to the Chicago economy has profound impact on the state's economy. The city of Chicago and the state of Illinois face many of the same dangers when it comes to our pensions. At the same time, we face unique problems that a one-size-fits-all framework will not fix. We require similar solutions, but a different mix that is more in tune with our unique challenges. Already, Chicago faces $20 billion in unfunded liabilities for its 6 separate pension funds. Unfortunately, this is only the beginning. Forecasts for future obligations show the burden of pensions on the city taxpayers rising rapidly. In less than 4 years, by 2016, which is just around the corner, payments to meet our pension obligations will comprise 22% of the city's entire corporate budget. That is $1.2 billion, doesn't even include pensions for the teachers and employees in our park district, comprising then the entire 6 plans. And that $1.2 billion is growing larger each passing year after that. If no changes are made, the $1.2 billion we need for pension payments present a set of challenges that no Solomon-like wisdom can resolve. I'd like you to think about it this way. $1.2 billion is close to what we spend on the salaries for every employee in the Chicago Police Department for an entire year. $1.2 billion would pay for the resurfacing of around 30,000 blocks in Chicago, or 5,000 miles. $1.2 billion could build 10 new high schools and 12 new libraries. $1.2 billion could pay for the public health programs, garbage collection, tree trimming, recycling, street cleaning, snow removal, programs at our parks, and for our seniors, all in a single year. As President Kennedy said, to govern is to choose. Our taxpayers cannot afford to choose between pensions and police officers, or pensions and paved streets, or pensions and public health. At $1.2 billion and growing fast, our pension payments will eventually squeeze out every essential service that residents require and a city must provide. That is why we need reform, and I want to thank you again for your leadership to tackle this difficult issue. As early as next year, the burden from higher payments to our teachers' pensions will require us to make drastic changes in our schools. We've already reached the tax caps. We can only raise the $300 million we need to pay for pensions with direct cuts that will eventually affect the classroom. By way of reference, last year we cut $140 million out of operations. We added 6,000 children to a full day of kindergarten using that money. 2,500 kids to our magnet schools. 14 high schools got the state-of-the-art security systems, and we added 2 additional teaching academies in the school using that dollars. But facing this pension, we'd have to make a change in the strategy and begin, rather than protecting and investing in the classroom, begin to cut the classroom. And it would be the direct opposite of what we did. Rather than invest in the classroom, we'd be cutting and affecting it just to meet the obligations of the pension system. Without any reforms, cuts in our classrooms would mean an average class size of up to 55 students. That is unfair to our teachers, who cannot be expected to manage and teach so many students at once. It is unfair to our students, who cannot learn in such a crowded classroom. And it is unfair to the taxpayers and families in Chicago who rely on our schools to provide opportunity for Chicago's children. This legislative body has achieved many landmark educational reforms for Chicago's schools, Chicago's teachers, and for Chicago's students. It was legislation from this body that provided statewide standards for Chicago schools. Legislation from this body created more choice for parents in Chicago and a common core curriculum for our students. It was legislation from this body that made possible the push for a full school day and a full school year to match the full potential of Chicago's students. Without pension reform, these improvements in standards and accountability would be stopped in their tracks. Without pension reform, we'll be forced to mortgage our children's future to pay for our past. Chicago taxpayers have also suffered from one major inequity for which there is no rationale. Only taxpayers in Chicago pay for the pensions of their own teachers and those of teachers statewide. If taxpayers in Northbrook or Springfield or Marion were faced with that kind of double duty, their mayors would not tolerate it. And as mayor of Chicago, neither will I. These payments are a relic from the past that none of us would include in a new system if we were starting from scratch. All that Chicago taxpayers and I, as their mayor, want is equity with taxpayers in the rest of the state. I have worked with my finance team to develop a set of reforms that reduces our unfunded liabilities by 40%. This mix of reforms is tailored to the different characteristics and challenges of each of the distinct funds. And by enacting these reforms together, we can protect our taxpayers and preserve the retirement security for public employees. And if we make no changes at all across the different systems or funds, we would have to raise city property taxes by 150%. And as long as I am mayor of Chicago, that is a burden I refuse to put on the backs of our taxpayers. We did not make the tough choices to balance our budget and hold the line on property taxes and invest in our future, only to face a 150% property tax hike. Businesses and families would flee, not just from our city, but from our state. And that's not the way to win the future, which is what all of us are trying to do. Just think about it. No family or company will come to Chicago if property taxes climb so quickly and so high. No parent would want their daughter or son putting down roots in a city that has made that kind of choice. Raising property taxes by 150% would ruin family budgets, corporate budgets, municipal budgets, and ultimately the state's budget. The path to pension reform begins with changes to the pay increases that COLA provides retirees. These increases present the biggest potential burden on our taxpayers and the single greatest threat to the retirement security of our present public employees. I repeat, this is the single biggest burden. We need to hit the pause button so the entire system can catch its breath and we can wrap our arms around our challenges. By doing this, we will stop digging a deeper hole and allow the reforms we put in place to take hold. Think about it this way. A city employee who retired in 1995 with a $60,000 pension now collects $100,000 a year in payments because of the built-in increases. When we can't afford automatic pay raises for current employees, we can't afford them for all retirees. Pension funds that benefit from a compounded COLA have grown nearly 30% faster than inflation in just the past 10 years. So while public employees who pay for these pensions had to take furlough days or accept a pay freeze, retirees received an automatic increase or the equivalent of a pay raise. It's unfair to current employees to keep a guaranteed increase when it endangers the very system they depend on and pay into for their own retirement one day. I want to say it again. Retirees did nothing wrong. This is a product of people agreeing to things, knowing full well they couldn't be paid for when the bill came due. After we created room for our reforms to be enacted and our funds to be strengthened during that time, we would introduce a simplified COLA at the end of 10 years. Cities and states around the country are considering the same kind of reforms for their automatic increases. The state of Rhode Island has already passed reforms that include a temporary pause on the cost of living increase to provide them the time for their reforms to gain traction, similar to the proposal I am making here. The burdens of a compounded COLA on our pension funds demand that we face a difficult but simple truth. The way the COLA is currently structured is no longer sustainable and needs to be brought to bear on it. COLA reform, or the cost of living reform, will provide us the space to make other essential changes. Just as the governor proposed in his framework, the City of Chicago will also ask employees to contribute more to secure their pension funds and their benefits. I don't want to underestimate the difficulty of higher annual payments, but by phasing in a 1% increase each year for the next 5 years, we will provide time for employees to adjust and to plan for the future. For those who say this change is too severe, I want to be clear. We are making this reform so we can be honest with our employees. Only by making this change can we honor their work and contributions with a dignified retirement system and a benefit package. Only by telling the hard truths and making tough changes can we repair the broken system. We also have a fortunate reality to consider. Retirees are living longer. Since Social Security and the most city and state retirement programs began, life expectancy has grown by more than 20 years. The longer and more active lives of our retirees have enriched our society in every way, but our pension funds have not kept up with these changes in life expectancy. By raising the retirement age by 5 years, we can bring our retirement security system into line with both the governor's framework and many programs for private employers. Lastly, we need to introduce choice into the retirement system. While this reform is not meant for everybody, choice is an important way to attract the best talent and line our plans up with what the private sector offers new employees. Offering more choice allows us to reduce pressure on our budget and taxpayers while providing options for those who have decades to plan for their retirement. Make no mistake, we need to do this incrementally in a way that is smart. But we know we will never have a better chance to make our retirement plans more competitive and consistent with those offered in the private sector. We know there are times when people give good reason to deride politics and politicians. And I say this as someone who has had a long career in politics and public service. But the size of the challenges we have to confront provide us a chance to show the public we can put principle and practical solutions ahead of short-term political gain. All of us know there is still no way to take politics out of this process. But in our discussions here and in conversations throughout the Capitol and the state, I think we can sense that the politics are changing. I saw it last year when I ran for mayor. I vowed to bring pension reform to Chicago, and I heard that from plenty of people who did agree and didn't agree with what I proposed, but they appreciated the honesty. But the more I speak with taxpayers in Chicago, the more I believe the public wants us to level with them. And when it comes to pension reform and retirement security, I believe that being honest with people makes for both good policy and good politics. It's also important to remember why we've reached this point. We're here today because we didn't level with the public in the past. The day of reckoning was pushed down the road and the can was kicked down the road. We postponed making choices, and we made promises that couldn't be kept. Look, I didn't come here because I'm short of some challenges back in Chicago. I, like you, have plenty of them. But this is one challenge we can't run away from. This is one challenge that we have the responsibility to deal with. And I think the public will appreciate the responsibility, the honesty that all of you have shown at this point in tackling one of the most difficult issues that clearly raises people's blood pressure. But our office and our offices that we all hold require us to deal with this issue for the health of our economy and for, in my view, meeting the challenges of our future. like you, back at our desks, we got other things that are pressing. But nothing looms over the economy and all our efforts at education, at finances, creating jobs, growing the economy, like the uncertainty that the pension system has created. And I also think, unlike what has happened, by being honest with people, dealing with this difficult issue, we will have done something for our state and the people that pay the bills that is long required, and be honest also with the people that are paying into the system, whether they're the public employees or the taxpayers who are asked to actually pay the bills. So I applaud you for the leadership you've shown, the courage you've shown to taking this on. And I'm sure there will be people that won't like what we're doing. But none of us chose this for popularity or because the public opinion said this was the one to rush in and try to handle. But it comes with the responsibility we all have as holders of the offices we have. I look forward to being your partner with all of you today. I want you to know whatever political capital I have earned, I am willing to invest it in finding a comprehensive pension solution that's honorable to our taxpayers and our public employees. I am confident that if we work together, we can make the changes and the compromises to see our way through this challenge. I want to thank you for the chance to speak with you on behalf of the City of Chicago and its residents. And I pledge that I will do all I can to bring a substantive and real reform to our retirement system. And again, I want to thank you, Madam Chairman, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Leader, and the rest of the members for your willingness to take on an issue that you didn't create, but your willingness to help solve it for future generations. Thank you. I don't make any bones about it. I talk about it up front. I'm up front about it. It is a change for current retirees, but given the buildup over the years, as I mentioned, I think in the text, over the last decade, the last 10 years, there's been a 30% increase in the payment to retirees than there has been inflation. So it allows us, that's the single biggest lever to allow the system to catch its breath, put the reforms in place, allow the system to gain strength so those who are paying into it currently can be assured there's going to be a pension system and a retirement system on the back end.
So let me understand it. So does it come, that COLA comes back after 10 years?
A simplified one.
Okay.
Which is like a 1%, 1.5%. You would, but the compounded 3%, regardless of what inflation is, that would be put on hold so we can get all the other pieces in place.
So, I mean, so what's the urgency right now for the city? Why now?
Well, I hope, I mean, I don't want to go through it again. First of all, we have a $20 billion unfunded liability. Second of all, the most important urgency is it leaves a level of uncertainty around the city that affects whether businesses are going to expand or whether they're going to even come locate in the city. And without resolving it, if nothing is done in the next 4 years, you're looking at a dramatic increase in property taxes, which I will not do. I don't think it's right. I don't think anybody would do it if we could avoid it, and which is what this point is. And the other point is, when that comes, the $1.2 billion annual payment, 22% of the city budget, you have to then make choices. That's like the entire, as I said, the entire payroll for the police department. It's all the basic services that comes with the parks for seniors, public health, street cleaning, garbage collection, street sweeping, snow plowing. That's what that all equals. And you cannot be in a situation where those are the set of choices. Nobody can make that set of choice between that payment or investing in your future or providing basic services for a city to function that the residents expect you to provide. That's the urgency. And the truth is, this is a problem. Didn't start yesterday, didn't start 2 years ago. It's been accumulating for years, decades. But the day of reckoning has arrived. And that's true for the state, it's true for the city. And while the Mayor Canning is from Wilmette, he represents all the mayors of the Northwest Side, the council, it's true for every municipality and every state. I think the difference will be is we will tackle ours with your leadership in a comprehensive fashion.
And you addressed this in your comments too. You anticipate the tax increase to be about 150%?
If nothing is done at all, property taxes will have to go up 150% to meet the obligations.
And then for new employees that don't plan on working for the city, let's say for, 30 years or something, how is this fair to them? I mean, what happens to them if they decided to quit after 10 years? Do they get to take their pension with them, or?
Well, do you want to go into some of that?
with a choice system. Hello, my name is Lois Scott, Chief Financial Officer of the City of Chicago. Choice would enable our newer employees to have some portability and control. The choice would enable them to, if they worked for a couple years, to be able to take their benefits that have been earned with them. Under the current system, they get their own contributions back, but they get no interest earnings and no economic benefit.
And if I can add also, but I did not know this when I was running, but it came through the briefing and the transition. While we have a pension system, the City of Chicago public employees, about 70% of them also enroll in a 401k plan. It's one of the largest 401k plans in the country. Yet we have no ability to kind of help them manage through because where an employee is very young in their years as a public employee versus somebody near retirement, you can't make those adjustments given for their differences of where they are in their lives. And this is introducing in a very limited way the idea of choice.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Leader Cross?
Mayor, thank you for being here and for your leadership. I think it's a good lesson for elected officials to watch what you've done, even in your campaign. You talked about the need to do pension reform. So for the legislators that are nervous about a pension vote, you obviously prevailed. And so thank you for your strength on it. I want just an observation. I think you've done a better job than anyone so far on this overcrowding issue, or crowding out issue. Mm-hmm. What I think was helpful in Rhode Island, where the treasurer did a very good job. And I think to the extent that this conversation is going to continue, how you're describing the crowding out issue is effective. And I think people need to know the ramifications of not doing pension reform because of your pressure. So it's just an observation, keep that up. Just a couple questions. On your DC option or your choice, do you see a way to offer that for current employees as opposed to just new employees? Because I think there's some merit to that idea.
Mm-hmm. You go ahead, and then I'll...
Our proposal is just for newer employees,
Okay.
those who have opportunity to actually build up some resources in that, so we don't intend it for the bulk of our employees.
Okay.
Can I, two things, if I can, Mr. Leader. One is, look, as you call it the crowding out, but I call it the governing process, which is a set of choices.
Yeah.
You also face that. It's not unique to Chicago, but it does, you can only do so much with X dollars, and you can either make the payment system into the pension, or you can invest in the future with parks and schools and issues like that. To the other piece, we're going to be, our proposal while choice is to be sensitive, and that is you want a strong defined benefit plan, but you want to give newer employees, limited, the ability to kind of plan for the future. And so you have to be smart about how you do it, sensitive that you don't want to undermine one system while you're giving the ability to give individual employees that choice.
I'm in complete agreement. And my only question was, I think that for the into the 5 years or 10 years of employment, I think we're in a different, those folks are a different generation who do move and need them. There's going to be mobility, and I think that the DC plan is attractive. So I'm supportive of it. I just wondered if we could expand it. Just two other questions. From a timing standpoint, I happen to be of the belief we need to do this spring. Do you have a pressure time-wise on when you have to have this done from your perspective?
Well, as you probably know, some people think I'm just normally impatient as a genetic area. But that said,
I've heard that.
Is that said by friend and foe alike?
Friends.
Right. Well, look, that's something you guys have to decide. I know this, Mr. Leader, which is this issue is not going to get easier to solve. It gets harder. Each day that goes by, the problems get compounded. I think there's no doubt, given that you have this meeting, the governor has his proposal. I've now laid out mine. I know there's no doubt there's other municipal leaders who have their own issues. That moment of truth has arrived. You guys, I believe, know that, and we'll work on resolving it. As it relates to the specific time, I am all confident that we will get this issue resolved this year.
Last question, and thank you for that. There has been a difference of opinion in this building on issues revolving around the Constitution. And we obviously all want to have a constitutional bill because we really have no choice but to get to that. In your proposals, one of the beliefs is that we have to have this concept of offer and consideration in order to make it constitutional. Do you have a perspective or thought on that?
We brought our city's corporate counsel, who usually tells me the word no, so you can now hear it for yourself. Yeah. Very rarely, if I may say that. Go ahead.
Steve Padden, Corporation.
Hi, Steve.
Sir, you need to put your, sir, yeah, thank you. If you can put the microphone on and say your name again for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. The answer is consideration is one way to get there. We think that there are other ways to defend the constitutionality of the plan and the proposal that the mayor has laid out. First and foremost, what we're talking about here is something that we believe preserves and protects pension benefits rather than impairs them. And this kind of right-sizing and putting pensions on a sustainable basis going forward. And as I think the mayor also made clear, first and foremost, the predicate is getting the necessary reforms. But when those reforms are in place, and I think there's an acknowledgement that pension benefits that have been promised should be funded. So when you look at it as a whole, as a package, what we think we have here is something that is the exact opposite of impairment. It's preserving and protecting and enhancing. The greatest form of impairment is to not be able to receive payment when your pension benefit is due. So the consideration argument, I think, is a viable and a valid one. It depends on the facts and the circumstances. I think we're very supportive of that in terms of the governor's plans for purposes of the state's pension plans. But we think that what we're proposing here, which, as the mayor mentioned, is looks at our unique problems and is fit for us, also is supported by other arguments as well.
Let me, if I can, in short, I'm not interested in a futile political exercise. So everything we've done, Steve and his team have scrubbed from the basis that it stands the merit of would pass constitutional muster. I'm not looking for another exercise just to go through it. We believe this does, and we have done the homework on it to substantiate it from a legal standpoint. That's known as translation of what Steve just said.
One other real quick. The 10-year pause, which is intriguing.
Yeah.
What's the significance of the 10 years from a numbers standpoint? Is there belief we're catching up in that 10-year period? That's enough time?
I'm a finance person. There is no force on earth quite like compound interest.
Right.
And a 3% compound pay raise really becomes unmanageable going forward. As the mayor spoke very articulately, that means a 30% pay raise beyond inflation. So we really have got to get our arms around this and push that pause button so that we can actually get some breathing room and stop the bleeding and hemorrhaging on our unfunded liabilities.
No argument from you. And again, I'm asking my questions not to be argumentative at all. I like most everything you're talking about. But how did you get to the 10 years on the pause?
Well, we feel that the front end is where we need the most help, where we've got a projected low inflationary economy. Not only has inflation been low for the past 10 years, but the projection is for the next 10 it will be low as well, based on all economic research we've done. We believe that actually putting that pause button on will save materially in what the unfunded liability would be.
And that's enough time? You think
we
10's
believe
enough?
it will.
Okay.
We believe it's enough time to catch up.
Mr. Leader, if I can also, there's two ways to look at this. One, for the system, as Lois just addressed. That's the first way to look at it in the proper way. And it doesn't exclude what I'm about to say, but in addition to, while it's good for the system, it allows you to catch, the system itself, after years of not being dealt with, catch its breath, have the reforms to work their way in strengthening the retirement. I also believe from the perspective of a current public employee, it's fair. You're paying into a system now, or sometimes, our city employees went through furloughs, which was the equivalent of a pay cut. Yet the retirees were getting a 3% compounded. I don't think it's fair from the perspective of a public employee to have that compounded growth while in fact they're either paying more for health care or other types of pieces of their own benefit package. So from a pure fairness position, I believe it's right. From the system's perspective, I think it's right. And from the taxpayers who haven't seen that type of growth in their own paycheck, I think it's right. So on any other level, and don't diminish the politics with it. And again, I want to repeat, as I said, it's not the retirees' fault. Yet we need to do that. Hit the pause button. Rhode Island did it. Let the entire system catch its breath. and be fair to everybody else in the system. So that's why, so at a number of levels, I think it's the right thing to do.
I think you've articulated good reasons. Again, my point was not to argue. I thought Rhode Island talked about kind of a pause until they were able to get funded at a certain percentage, 80%.
That's Rhode Island, and we gave you what we think is right for Chicago.
No, I think there's obviously somewhere in there that works, but again, I don't ask it to argue. I think I get the policy reason, and it makes total sense. I'm in agreement. So again, thank you for your presentation. It was excellent.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Leader Cross. I need to add Representative Biss to the roll, and I neglected to call on Representative Zaleski before Representative Poe. So, Representative Zaleski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have two quick questions. And the leader and yourself just touched on Rhode Island along with what you did in your prepared remarks. Can you just elaborate a little bit on what they did with COLA and how that compares and contrasts with the plan you're offering to the General Assembly?
Sure. Let me do this. This is a little by memory, and then Lois can correct me. In Rhode Island, they too hit the pause button on their compounded COLA, but their solution wasn't ours. That's where I think you begin to, there's two differences. I don't remember if they had a 10-year or not. They said when it would, ours phases out at 10 years and we go to a simplified COLA. In Rhode Island, they go to a simplified COLA. Their trigger isn't time. It's when you get to 80% funding level. So that's their trigger. We believe that we designed it, that 10 years gave the time for the fund, as well as to the taxpayers and the current public employees. Their trigger was 80% funding level. Ours was based on a timeline, two different types of triggers, but both then go down to a simplified COLA rather than a compounded. Is that
The one addition I'd make, everything there I agree with. One addition I'd make is that once they get back to 80% funding, the COLA from that point forward is a function of what the investment return on the pension plan has been. So that if the investment returns are substantially above the actuarially assumed rate of return, then they get a portion of that. If the actual rates of return on the fund from an investment perspective are below that, then the retirees do not get a COLA.
And then just one additional question. Part of your plan includes offering an alternative, sort of a new way of, new retirement model. Can you explain how, if the city offers a current defined contribution to deferred compensation plan, how it's working and what the new plan, how the new plan might differ?
do you want to do some of that now? Sure. Okay. Yeah.
I think we are entering into a discussion both with the legislature as well as with our partners in labor and our employees and our public about what the right way to do that. We have evaluated elements like a cash balance or a defined contribution plan, and we look forward to actually fine-tuning exactly what the best option would be.
One principle I have is nothing we do can undermine the defined benefit plan. So it has to be kind of thought through, finally developed, and negotiated through. But I do want to say that in the future is what's going on in the private sector, what's going on in other states and cities and around the country is the opportunity to give newer employees that choice that doesn't exist in a kind of a, I don't want to say a rigid, but a top-down type of system. And again, 70% of the city employees have both a 401k they're contributing to and the traditional retirement system. I want to give them some choice so for both the portability as well as how they want to mix their retirement, because their horizon is longer than somebody who has been working for numerous years for the city, and they have a different type of retirement requirement at a different point in where they are in their lives and planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman.
If I could take a chairman's prerogative here and just give a little context to your 10 years. I think the state, if we were to stay on the funding system that we're on, doesn't achieve 80% funding for another 30 years. So that gives you some comparison between Rhode Island and what
Well, again,
the city is offering. So,
Madam Chairman, everybody's different.
no, I agree. I just to give members a little context. Representative Poe.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. And I want to compliment you to come up with some facts, but it seems like so far this year we haven't seen a plan, and I compliment you on bringing that plan. I don't have a conflict of interest asking this question either, because I'm past this age limit, so I can ask you about the 5 years, because it would never affect a couple of us on this committee. So does that affect teachers? policemen, firemen.
Do you want to go now? I'll go right after.
The concept is that we have a 5-year extension on the retirement ages as they currently exist, so depending on what individual plans presently offer, we would extend that by 5 years. And we would feather that in over time so that those very close to retirement are not inadvertently disadvantaged. So we would feather that in so that people with certain, if they're ready to retire in a month, certainly we wouldn't impose a new age requirement. So that would be part of what we would propose for the law.
Talk to me a little about all the employees. Let's say they got 5 years left. How does this affect them? Does that mean they're going to have to go to 67, or is there, how far back does the phase-in work?
We were thinking of the proposal will be for a 10-year phase-in at different levels during the course of that period. So
So if you had 10 years to go, or you might be able to retire still before you're 67.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
If you have, you only need 10 more years on your retirement.
Okay.
Can you retire then? Will you be able to retire before you're 67?
Yes, but with perhaps a diminished benefit level. So we would look at the proposed retirement age at 67 and look at the years of service and the vesting at that time, and then the law would outline how that was feathered in. So that for the people 10 years and out, 10 years to retire and out, we would actually begin to feather that through.
I guess,
if I can, Mr. Representative, is each of these parts are part of, you're not going to go, cold turkey on day one. So each process, whether it's more payment into it, is on an annual basis. Introducing all these into the system, as I said, using the pause to put things that we believe strengthen the system and are fair to both the taxpayers and the employees. So you maybe have somebody 20 years out will be in a different situation than somebody 8 years out, and they would be, it would reflect their contributions and the time and where they are in their service.
there's a lot of things I guess I agree with in the plan, but the 67 does
Why don't we just
concern
stop
me.
there?
Well, no, yeah.
Since we agree.
The 67, what bothers me is I think we're contributing, in the economic times we have now, we're contributing to unemployment, because when those people aren't retiring at 62 now, we're not opening jobs on the bottom end, or where they start. And another thing is, the last 5 years are there, I think that's probably when they're going to be making the most money in their career. Why, if we had new employees for that 5 years, I'm hoping you're factoring that in to what that could actually save on their retirement also, because they're going to come in on a different system, maybe a tier 1, tier 2, and they're not going to be making the highest salaries, that person that's finishing their career.
If I can address one assumption in your statement, if I heard it right, and I apologize, the door opened. No, the assumption you have is that people at 62 are retiring, and I don't think that's true. Or at 50. In fact, they're going on with many years of work left in them, and they do work, which is a reflection of not something unique here. This is the change that's going on in society. People aren't retiring at 62. They actually have many more years of work ahead, and yet we are paying a retirement benefit. And I'm not saying that things were agreed to, so that we're working through that issue. But the assumption on this, and again, the rest of the part of what you said, I hear you out, but the assumption is that they're retiring. And I don't believe people at 62 are retiring. Actually, they go on and continue many years of very healthy and productive work. And so what we're suggesting is reflecting that with 20 years more on people's life expectancy, and the pressure on the system, and the fact that they actually go on and work, now they've earned their benefits. I'm not just deriding that. Let's reflect, though, where we are actually in the system, the change in society, the change in working habits, and have the system, just like it's being debated at the national level on Social Security, reflect that change. It's good for the system, it's good for the employees, and it's honest with everybody that's expected to pay into it, that in fact they're not retiring. Where in years past, 62 may have been exactly what it was. Retirement age. And at Social Security level, people who retire at 62 get a lower benefit than people at 67. That's some of the changes that are going on. So that's the one assumption I would, if I could, just to, in the area of being straightforward and honest.
I guess I was thinking of that kindergartner and kindergarten teacher. 67.
But it's where they are.
I don't know who'd be more uncomfortable, the teacher or the student, so.
No, there's a number. Why don't we just, as I said before, why don't we agree to agree? Okay.
And not to put words in the mayor's mouth, but Ray, you might be one of those people that he's talking about, so.
I think Ray's very productive, personally.
That was my point. Representative Winters.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Mayor. I only had time to get through the packet that was prepared by the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund and noticed that one of the first bills that Representative Poe and I were able to vote on as freshmen in 1995 allowed the Chicago Public Schools to divert property tax money that was coming in for pensions and use it in the CPS general budget. And between 96 and 2005, over $1 billion, almost $1.25 billion was not put into the pension fund, and another $1 billion since that time. I understand right now there's a 3-year pension holiday for the CPS that, again, investments in the pension funds are not being made. Is there a plan to backfill that, or, you know, where are we? That's part of the problem, why we're in this kind of a situation.
I understand, and as two things I would like to note on the, at least on the, as you started when you first voted on something in 1995, a retiree in 1995 was making $60,000 on their system, and today they're making $100,000. That's a dramatic, it is what it is, which is an increase of $40,000 over that period of time. Second, I'm not here to make judgment about what happened in the past.
Thank you. That was a bad vote, so.
Well, it is what, no. At that point, you made whatever vote you made.
Right.
The moment here is about what do we got to do for the future, both for the future of the taxpayers, the public employees, and most importantly, I really do believe this issue affects the atmosphere as it relates to our economy and creating jobs and the uncertainty around it. So we can talk about what was done in the past, or we can talk about what we got to do to prepare for the future. And there's plenty of time for a discussion, a healthy discussion. Your vote in 95, decisions that were made. I'm interested in what we have to do going forward, because I think the decisions we make will pave a different road going forward. And that starts with leveling with people. But as I told you, in the education system itself, we invested last year in the classroom. More kids are going to kindergarten in Chicago today than they were before I was mayor. Full day. Most important part of their lives is that early years. We got more kids going to magnet schools. We have kids now going to high schools with state-of-the-art security systems. So we cut operations and invested in the classroom.
But are those operational expenditures that you're adding on as a result of the pension holiday that CPS is taking?
The ones I just talked about were clear cuts we were making to operations throughout the system, including the central office.
But all money is fungible. If you had made the pension payments, that money would not have been available.
As you know, before I got here, you voted on the holiday, and that was the 3-year holiday. That's what I did, and we made the investments. But let me, if I can, in closing, because I'm going to leave you with 3 people that I fully trust that will get into the nitty-gritty. First, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to address all of you. Second, I want to thank you for your leadership. Third, for your courage to take on a very difficult issue that has a lot of politics associated with it. And you're not going to win what I call popularity contests. But you are going to do, in tackling this issue and dealing with these challenges, very complicated. I don't think anybody should underestimate them. Very complicated issues. We are going to do what's right for our taxpayers, right for our public employees, and most importantly, right for our economy and the job creation that comes with this. And I pledge to you my full support in coming up with a solution that works for all parties, as difficult as that will be in a context that will be heated. But all of you, like I, have responsibilities, and we will exercise that with all that comes with holding this office to do what's right for the people of, in my case, the people of the city of Chicago. That's right for them and right for their public employees. And I think it's being honest with people that are currently public employees, getting a system so every pay stub where they pay into that system, by fixing it, we're being true to that payment. And today, I can't look at the taxpayers or the public employees and say, what you're doing is honest to the system. It isn't honest to either party, and we need to get it in a place where you bring that honesty. So again, I want to say thank you for your leadership, and thank you for allowing me to at least both address you and hopefully in the future be your partner in resolving this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that you're here.
Thank you.
One point of clarification I wanted to make on the CPS quote-unquote pension holiday. CPS actually did pay pension, the full amount of the pension law. It was, last year I believe it was $208 million of pension benefits, pension costs last year, so it was not a quote-unquote holiday. It was just a reduced amount for a period of a couple of years.
Thank you. Representative Singer.
I just have a quick question. And number one, it's refreshing to hear the discussion today because many of us have been working on this pension issue for years here at the state. We had a bill last year. We had work groups this summer. We've got work groups now. You've got all your systems, teachers, police, fire, laborers, municipals are all in there. Are you planning to treat each fund the same when it comes to changes to the system, or are you looking at them differently? Because I know you probably have different funding levels, and how do you then get to the unfunded liability on each?
The framework that the mayor outlined will be similar across all funds. The basic principles of a COLA suspension followed by a reduced simplified COLA thereafter. A 5-year increase in retirement age. Of course, right now some of the retirement ages are different between our funds, and the step up in employee contributions will be consistent. So those concepts will be consistent, as will the introduction of choice for new employees.
Okay. And then my last question, I know we were talking about the need to get these things done right away. Do you have any idea what budget relief you will have if you get these reforms in this year?
Yes, I'm happy to speak on behalf of the city's funds and also give a highlights which others could speak in more detail on about the Chicago teachers. The Chicago Public Schools will face a $300 million increase next year, as the mayor spoke about, because of the limitations of tax caps. Then that will force class sizes to increase to approximately 55 students per classroom. For the city of Chicago, our budgetary impact will rise to $1.2 billion from the current level, which it's now at $470 million. Just to put that in context, that is at least as large as our entire property tax levy this year.
Representative May.
One issue that also has a huge budget impact for the state, and I would assume for the city, if you wanted to tell me what the budget impact, and are you considering any changes in retiree health care benefits? Sometimes they're considered together or separately. I was going to ask about a bill, but you said you will have a bill, so will that be part of it at all?
Just a second. Yeah, the city's retiree health care is very different from the state, so no, we don't anticipate retiree health care being part of our bill.
Okay.
Representative Morris, or Representative May, was that it? Representative Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to kind of dovetail off of a question by Representative Singer regarding the different plans and if there would be equal treatment. In which plan do the aldermen participate, or where do the aldermen receive their
Introduce yourself.
retirement benefits?
I'm Alexandra Holton, Budget Director for the City of Chicago. The aldermen are part of our municipal employee benefit pension plan.
Okay. Last spring, we talked about a pretty controversial bill, Senate Bill 512, and in it, the 5 different state plans were going to be treated differently. The actuaries looked at what the benefit was to the General Assembly members, for example, and their contribution rate was going to be considerably higher in order to pay for what the actuaries said those plans were worth. So I was just wondering if you would consider, instead of just doing a flat across-the-board treatment, if it would be possible legally to put the aldermen in a different category and to see if they really are contributing enough to make the difference for what their plans are worth.
That's certainly not something we've looked at yet. I mean, we could put it in and take a look at it, but it's not part of our current plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Biss.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for being here. And I want to echo the appreciation that's been articulated by a few people of the enormous, let me say it once more just in case, enormous benefit that accrues from the articulation of a publicly stated and fairly specific plan. I think it really focuses the discussion in a way that everybody on all sides of the issue benefits from. I want to follow up, though, on Representative Sanger's and Morrison's questions regarding the 5 different funds. You briefly touched on your response to Representative Sanger on the different nature of the benefits, but the maybe even bigger difference is the different fiscal position that the 5 funds are in. You know, enacting these changes would, I would presume, enormously ameliorate whatever challenges the Chicago Teachers Pension Fund is experiencing, and might leave the firefighter fund still in a state of some challenge. Can you talk around that question? So both sort of what these changes would do in terms of the funding projections for the 5 different funds, and how you arrived at your savings target. Was it specifically to shore up the most troubled fund, or was it based upon an average because money is fungible, or was it something else?
I think equity has been one of the themes that the mayor raised today generally, and we're trying to develop plans that are equitable across all of our employees, so we're not preferencing one group of employees over another. That said, as the chairman said, as well as has been articulated elsewhere, our funding levels range from a low in the low 30s for our firefighters to a high in around 70 of laborers. That's almost 2 years old data at this point. That's 2010 data, so we expect those to drop because the interest rate, the level of investment returns have not kept up with that 8% return. As a result, everybody is, as you correctly know, everybody's in a slightly different financial situation. As we develop the bill, we'll fine-tune exactly how some of those changes might be considered, but right now we will be applying the same framework to all of the pension plans.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.